Hello everyone. Thanks for watching the last session of project management classes. As you know, we have been continuing this series for 10 weeks now, and this will be a kind of wrap up and highlight the most important facts in project management. And I want you to review the whole recording before taking the progress quiz 3, which will cover the topics that we studied after progress quiz 2. So, understanding project management really starts with the project definition. I'm kind of have some slides from every week, and I'm kind of, I want you to remember some of the important stuff that we covered over the weeks, almost 3 months. So understanding project management is a key skill, okay? And it starts with a project definition. Why do we care about project management? Remember how I started this sessions series in the first one? I showed you this and I told you to use this in your personal life, in your professional life. And I wanted you to comment on what are you seeing in this, right? What do you see in terms of risk, schedule, finance, coordination, lack of confidence, lack of coordination? So use this description and use this slide in your professional personal development in your interviews as well. So I want you to remember what we discussed about this one. And then if you remember the project definitions that we studied, different definitions, you also remember what are the common themes in project management. Temporary, do you remember the other one? Temporary and unique, right? If you look at the project definitions in different resources, contexts, textbooks, then you will see different definitions, but really all it boils down to being temporary and being unique. This is the common themes in various project definitions. So when we say temporary, it has a definitive beginning and ending, okay? And unique in terms of requirements and the performance and deliveries, products, services, and results aren't routine. That's what identifies and what differentiates project management from some other activities that we do in business. And you will also quickly remember, and this is one of the things that I want you to bring up in your interviews if you're applying a project related jobs, triple constraints. Remember, I flagged this as TSC, time, scope, and cost. Okay, TSC is kind of like three balls that a project manager really needs to juggle, and then without dropping any of them. You want to be able to monitor the time, monitor the cost, and monitor the scope, which also means requirements, and to be able to balance them out and make the customer, the stakeholder, the boss, but the program manager, your team be happy. Okay, time, scope, cost, TSC. Time is sometimes referred as schedule. Cost is sometimes referred in different texts budget. Requirements, scope, yeah, it's also referred as requirements. And you will quickly realize that project management is not only balancing time, scope, and cost. It's also having a reliable, good communication, a timely communication with all the stakeholders. We also covered risk, right, in the summer sessions. We also covered risk in detail. You want to be able to manage the risk, mitigate the risks, identify the risk, and satisfaction, making the customer happy, successful, and also quality. Okay, so there are more than triple constraints, but the minimum is TSC. There are others as well. So your performance as a project manager will be assessed by looking at these circles. What are the hierarchy for projects? You will see we have projects at the very bottom, like the lowest level, and they are connected to programs, and they are a part of possibly portfolio. You may see sometimes some projects that are not under a program. There may be many reasons for that. Maybe they have a huge budget. They don't want to be, they need to be managed by themselves. So that's maybe a reason. So sometimes you will see standalone projects. Sometimes you will see standalone programs. So this hierarchy, that's why I kind of say it's kind of a hierarchy, right? So it's not exactly a hierarchy, but it's most common. This is project management process. Remember how I flagged this for you? Please use my flagging in your interviews. I coded this for you, IPEM CC. I being the initiation, P meaning the planning, E is execution, M is monitor and control, and the other C is closing. So IPEM CC. Basically what happens here is monitoring and control is kind of the base, the plate of this process, right? So this is the blue line. So monitor and control is basically everywhere. From initiation to closing, monitor and control is everywhere. So you have to always think of monitoring and control. Okay. And planning and execution is looking like an iterative process, which is true because you plan and execute, and then you have some feedback, you do something wrong, or you see that something is really successful, so you change your plan. You do it, execute it, and then you change your plan. And then finally you close your project, okay? We really drill down a lot and deep dive all of these, so that's just to remind you the IPEM CC to use it in your interviews. Then you come to requirements. We talked about requirements creep. What happens if a customer comes to you and say, hey, project manager, can you just quickly add, another requirements, or they want to change something, right? So then you want to tell them, you want to say them yes or no, or what do you say, right? Remember, we covered this great detail. That's important in this moment to keep track of your statement of work and scope. So if you don't want to do it, if it's you want to check if it's in the statement of work, if it's in the scope, right? If this is something agreed. If it's not, check to see, have your team work on it, analyze it, and see how much money, time, what other resources do you need to be able to achieve what the customer says. Okay. Then you need to have a plan. So an effective plan will be explicit, intelligible, flexible, controllable, and integrated. If the plan is not understood well by the customer and other stakeholders, it hurts back the project manager. You want to be able to convey your message. You want to be able to write an intelligible plan that everyone understands, because everything not understood, vague, unclear, hurts back to project manager, not the customer. As a project manager, you also want to know, and we studied this as well, project life cycle. In the beginning, you're not spending a lot of time and money, but as you go further down into the project life cycle, your resources, your utilized resources are increasing, and through the end, it's decreasing because you are almost going to deliver the deliverables or achieve the project objectives, right? According to PMBOK guides, PM process groups are initiating, which nicely aligns with the conceptual phase, and planning, which is feasibility and preliminary planning, and execution is the detailed planning and implementation phase, nicely aligns with, and monitoring and control. Termination phase is basically closing. So project lifecycle and PMBOK's process management process group are nicely aligned. Okay. So could you just quickly, so if a customer, if you stakeholder, and it doesn't have to be customer, maybe sometimes we even impose our own requirement creep on our team. Could you just quickly, it's a very dangerous sentence. Could you just quickly add this? Could you just quickly change this? Have a change management plan in place, and don't say yes to everything. Okay. don't let this happen to you, because if you leave it to each department, if you leave it to each expert, look, for example, production, if you leave it to the production guys, let's say our objective is creating a plane, right? Like a toy plane. So if the production guys will minimize the cost, so what they will argue is this is a plane, can fly a little bit, but it's the lowest cost, right? If you just leave it to them, this is a plane with a minimal cost, which is great, right? If you leave it to guidance, the whole plane will be guidance, right? So they will focus on guidance and they will not think about the other aspects of the project. So as a systems engineer, as a project manager, you want everybody to talk to each other. Your role as a project manager is facilitation, combine analysis, synthesis, make people listen to each other, tell them to give their ideas and feedback, and don't have this picture in your project. Because if you do that, over time it'll be really difficult to extract defects. As you go further into the project productive development, like from concept phase to design to development to production and disposal, if you see an error, or if there's a requirement creep, if there's a new scope added or deleted, then it's getting harder and harder. It's 3 to 6 times harder and more expensive during this phase. But through the production and testing, it's almost 1,000 times more expensive. Okay, so that's why as a project manager, in the beginning, when you're not really spending, but you're just committing, you're planning to spend, right? You're committing to spend in future. It's very important. So that's why we have an initiation phase in the project management. In the initiation phase, in the start phase, you want to be able to, step back a few foot and then think about what's going to happen, your commitments, your expertise, and then assess and estimate your cost. And hopefully you do it right the first time, so you don't have to change it. You don't have to manage the quality in a way that you have to extract all the defects and make them better, okay? Because it's getting harder. And then after statement of work, after scope, what you want to do is work on your WBS. Okay. Work on your WBS. What is WBS? Work breakdown structure. And in the work breakdown structure, work package is the most important thing. The lowest level of WBS is a work package with a unique identifier at which the durations and cost can be reliably estimated and reasonably managed and cannot be further subdivided. So work package is the lowest level of WBS. And WBS is a tool that is really important throughout the project management, but especially in the beginning too, to be able to estimate the durations, the cost, and everything. If you do it right the first time, WBS will help you a lot in the future with your budgeting, with your estimation, with your aligning your resources. Looks something like that. There are other versions that we covered if you remember, but that's one of the most common ones, like a graphical organizational chart design. Okay, there's project, there's subsystems, tasks, subtasks, work packages. That's the lowest level that you can attach a cost or duration or a person to do the job. And in this work package, there are different activities that needs to be done. Okay, I want you to use this in your personal and academic professional. And then you move into the Gantt chart. Okay, Gantt chart looks something like that. It's very nicely done. You know which activity comes first. This is kind of work breakdown structure turning into a Gantt chart and a PERT chart, PERT network diagram. Okay, so you know when the task will finish, what's the duration, what is the slack time. It kind of helps visualize what's going on with the project. If you get a slice in for example in here, So this activity, task 3, is almost ending. This one is in the middle. The blue ones, task 5 and 7, are just starting. Okay, so if you have a slice, then you understand who is doing what and what is the progress in the project. So then you want to move to a PERT chart, PERT diagram. You can understand and calculate how long will the entire project take. What are some of the risks in the network diagram? What activities are critical? And if something is delayed, what's the total project time delayed? How can we complete it more quickly? Remember, we talked about crashing, fast tracking, all these things, resource leveling, and that's why how you try to understand how quickly you want to complete the task. So, and then we also studied how would you estimate the duration for an activity. You want to gather historical data, right? Good idea, but if it's not there, what do? Then you use the Simpsons rule. Remember the Simpsons rule? You find out 3 data points, you ask an expert, and then say, what is the optimistic time that we will complete? What's the most likely time that we will complete? And what is the pessimistic time that we will complete, right? And then you multiply most likely with 4 and add up with optimistic and pessimistic and divide them by 6. That's how you come up with the estimated time. This is called Simpson's rule. And then you can calculate the standard deviation with T pessimistic minus T optimistic divided by 6, and then variance T optimistic minus T pessimistic minus T optimistic divided by 6 squared. So what did the 6 come from? It comes from basically, this one comes from here, but the other one comes from the 6 sigma, but I'm not gonna get into that. And then you move to PERT, and how we start with creating the PERT diagram is basically with an arrow. You start with an arrow and you add 2 activities. Let's say we have activity number 9, completing some kind of engineering testing, and activity 10 is completing the final report. And writing the report will take maybe 2 weeks, right? So the activity from 9 to 10 is writing the report, and let's say it's 3 weeks. Okay, so if you start writing the report, completing the testing at, let's say, 10th week, you are expecting to complete the final report by the 13th week, right? 10 week plus 3 weeks is 13 weeks. Okay, that's how we start building the PERT network diagram. And that 3 weeks, how we find out the 3 weeks is basically using historical data, asking expert, doing some focus groups, using Simpson's rule, and just based on experience. Okay, if we make good estimates, it helps us to estimate more correctly the overall delivery of the project. And then we have some time identifications. Okay, let's say we have an activity A and a B, and the activity duration is 2 days. So early start time is, let's say, 8 days. Okay, and the duration is 2 days. Then earliest finish time is 10 days. So if you start this activity on the 8th day, earliest start time, you can have an expected earliest finish time in 10 days. Latest finish time, let's say it's 17 days. Well, looking at this duration, what is the latest start time? You got it. It's 17 minus 2, it's 15. Here's the trick. What is the slack time? Do you still remember what was the slack time? Okay, so slack time is 15 minus 8 or 17 minus 10, which both of them gives us the number 7. So 7 is the slack time. Okay, so you can start this activity as early as 8 or as late as 15th day. That's what the slack time. You can finish this activity as early as 10th day or as late as 7th day, which gives us 7 days of slack time. Why is this important? It's very important when we want to find out this critical path. So that's an example of a PERT diagram. This is very simple. How many routes do you see? you see one route here and another path route here. It can be more complex. It will be more complex for bigger projects, right? This is just a just getting to know what's PERT diagram. It can be as difficult as this. How many paths do you see? Now I see many, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I guess 5 or 6. I guess it's 5 paths, right? So you want to be able to monitor all the 5 paths and be able to deliver the, this is start, this is end, be able to deliver the project. Okay, so now you know the durations. These number are durations of these activities. Now you want to be able to write down the when it starts and what's the earliest start time, what's the latest start time, and continue like that. You remember that one from the previous lectures. And then once you do the forward pass and then backward pass, what you will come up is you want to find out the zero slack, and then when you combine the zero slacks, you will have the critical path. The critical path is very important because that's how long will it take the project to be completed, and also it shows the risk along the path, because anytime a slack zero activity is late, then the overall project will be delayed, right? So that's a concern for all the stakeholders. And then we come to scheduling, right? And the scheduling, really, we need to refresh our probability knowledge a little bit. What's the probability of completing a project at or before a time? Remember in the classes we talked about, let's say we deliver the project in 102 days, right? If CEO tells us, hey, can you complete it 90 days, or give me a date that you are 100% for sure that you're gonna complete it, right? All these questions are valid questions, and as a project manager, we should be ready to respond these questions analytically, and we should be able to calculate this. Hopefully we have the tools and techniques that we learned here, so you can answer your CEO's questions. Statistics of summing variables. Of course, you cannot sum the standard deviations, but you will be able to come up with other solutions. Like you can go back to variances and then come back to standard deviations, right? That's what we covered in the class. It's just a refresher. And then we covered risk. What was risk? So these are the risk management steps. As you can see, there is a risk identification, risk assessment, risk response development, and risk control, which I flagged as IADC. IADC, please use this in your interviews to remember the steps. Try to identify all the risks as early as possible. And after identification, you want to go back to risk assessment and understand the severity and the likelihood of the risk. Why are we doing this? Because we want to prioritize the risk. We don't want to waste our resources. We want to attack which one is more risky, right? This also helps us understand what are the risks, what are the priorities, what should be the priorities. And then what we want to do is develop our risk response strategies. Do we accept the risk? Do we mitigate the risk? Do we avoid the risk? Do we share the risk? Okay, do we transfer the risk? These are all the risk response strategies that we can develop. And then of course controlling is actually in every step. So I want you to remember these feedback arrows, like new risks. When you're doing the step 2, new risks may arise and then they come back feeding into the step 1. Or even in step 4, there may be new risks, right? Because we don't know all the risks in the beginning. There may be known unknowns and unknown unknowns too. So that's why risk management is a repetitive process, and you want to be able to always monitor and progress, always monitor and control. Okay. After you identify the risk, now you have a known risk list, which will change, right? Some of the risks may not be risk anymore after some time, or there may be new risks. And when you assess the risk, now you have the risk assessment. You can use tools like root cause analysis, 5 Why technique, FMEA, CEM, any tools that you learn. After risk step 3, Now you have the management plan, and then of course you have the risk register. So risks are not always negative. So if it's negative, we call it threat. If it's positive, we call it opportunity. How come a risk is positive? Well, yeah, even during the pandemic, let's say you acquired a company, a technology company that delivers food to people, right? Or a platform like an app. Then you get, there's a risk that maybe people will not order online, right? But there's a risk that they will order online, and you will have a big market share, right? Because during the pandemic we were not able to go to restaurants, so they will use your platform and you'll make a lot of money, right? So that's a risk, but it's a positive risk in a way that you can multiply your revenue. So if it's a threat, then if it's a negative risk, then it's a threat, right? And we talked about the mouse example, you remember that one. And risk definition: risk is an uncertain event or condition, if occurs, has a positive or negative effect on at least one project objective. So basically we don't bother with risks if they are not impacting us, if they are not impacting our project objectives. We should expect positive and negative effects as well, but remember, the definition says if occurs, so risk may not occur. If it occurs, what's the impact, what's the probability, right? That's how we make the risk assessment, if you can remember. You learned about how to aggregate the overall risk, and we did an example of what happens if you delay your studies one semester, right? What can go wrong in that semester? How likely will it happen? And what are the consequences? And you came up with the overall risk. Risk impact matrix, hands-on activity that we did. That's great for to convey our risk messages to managers. I would like to usually put them in monetary units, because they understand the money most. So what happens is you basically color, 5 times 5 is 25. So if this is very risky, you do highest risk with the highest probability and impact, you put it here. Here would be 1 times 1, so this is the lowest risk. In the middle is mediocre risk. Okay, so you want, if you want resources, want it to these like 25, or 5 times 4 is 20, 20 or 25. Okay, you remember that one too. So these are the risk response strategies. I am okay if you are choosing to accept the risk, which means you analyze the risk, you identify the risk, you analyze and assess it, you put a priority, but you are developing to accept. Accept means you do your action regardless of what is risk, and if the risk occurs, if it materializes, you basically do whatever is needed then, but you don't actively or proactively prepare for the risk. That's something that I respect, but don't do it like every time. Okay, you have other options. We studied this in detail, so make sure you understand those. This is another example of WBS. And then we looked at the schedule, baseline schedule, and how we do the resource leveling. Okay, so you can use Gantt charts and look at your personnel and look at who is doing what, and when you get a slice out of this Gantt chart, just to see and analyze how many employees are needing, do you have this much work, or using the slack time over here, here, and here, you can balance the work and assign it to someone else. Okay, so resource leveling is very important. Through the end of the semester, the project, you will have to compress the project. You will make crashing, you will do fast tracking, you will find other resources. So there are a lot of risks to compression. Quality issues arise. Errors are made by people, more and more errors, because they are working overtime, they are feeling fatigue, they are tired. So you may be skipping some statement of work. You have to find initial resources. And then you have, because of quality is going down, declining, you have a lot of rework and safety issues, job safety issues, maybe some lawsuits. Product safety, maybe you're skipping some important tests of quality tests or engineering standards test, and many others as well. So when you try to fast track or compress a project through the end, just be careful of these risks, okay? Be mindful of these risks. What is fast tracking? For example, you are starting the project and you have DFG activities and then you're ending the project. What you can do is, if it's possible, just do F and G in parallel. So you will save a lot of time. So G doesn't have to, if activity G doesn't have to wait for activity F, if it can start after activity D, then once it's done, the activity D is completed, just let F and G happen at the same time. Instead of in serial, just make them in parallel. Okay, that's fast tracking. For example, here, yeah, so compression and crash cost, but how do we find out like which activity should we crash, right? That depends on what is the cost. So how long is the project saying lasting, and then which activity to start, right? For example, if I add a G, what happens to the overall project? So what happens is you want to find out the normal cost, and if you crash, how many weeks, how many days are you saving? What is the total crash cost, and what is it in terms of per week cost? Once you analyze this, and you know, if the reds are the critical activity, you want to crash something on the critical activity, because if C and D is not critical on the critical path, then you don't want to bother with them, right? So you want to do something, because they are not on the critical path. Even though you crash those activity C and activity D, the overall project duration will not shrink. But once you analyze these columns, now you can look at the crash cost per week, and then you may decide which activity to start. Okay, in this example, crashing A first and then F and then E and then B will be wise. Okay, and after that you don't really need to crash, because it's not shrinking, it's not making shorter the overall project duration. So, and then we moved into the cybersecurity risk, and I told you my personal story, how I got a paper on my door saying that this is the second delivery attempt, and please call this number, have this number handy. And then they wanted to verify my phone number, my home address, without telling me anything about what is the box. Is it a document? Is it a book? Is it a food? So they wanted to gather all my information, right? And we mentioned about phishing, ransomware. But my story here is more complex. It's more mixed. It's more hybrid. Think about it. So there's someone in the call center, because on the paper it's saying call this number, right? When you call it, somebody's answering. So that somebody's paying that lady. Somebody's coming and putting this paper on my door. So there's someone physical right there. Somebody should be paying them, right? And this paper is being printed somewhere. So there's people being paid there. And there's technology involved, maybe database, a server, they know my phone number. These are all cost money to companies. So they are trying to like mix everything, and the only reason is for us to click that link, call that number, verify our personal information, right? Make us feel that it's real, because once we believe, we verify everything. Okay, so they are trying to make it more complex, so we can't really see the big picture. Okay, so be careful and don't rush. Always step back and then think about it. So protect yourself and your business when you are online. Think twice before clicking, think twice before posting, think twice before sharing, think twice before downloading. Okay, these are really important. connecting the dots. So I wanna complete this whole summer of 10 weeks by connecting the dots, as Steve Jobs says. So what is the big picture in project management? So you initiate the project, okay? You initiate the project and then you have a plan. And then with that plan, project management plan, you have a scope, right? It can be a project scope, also product scope, and then you write your statement of work. Of course, in discussion, in coordination with all the stakeholders. And then you brainstorm, you do some focus groups, some brainstorming, consulting, interview, and you come up with your work breakdown structure. This is the first thing after scope and statement of work, like very helpful, that you really need to visualize and make it right the first time. You will update it, you can update it, you will update it, but it's really important to do this brainstorming and then coming up with a good, reflecting the reality WBS. And then the WBS dictionary goes along with it, with some more instructions, of course, some more details. And then it turns into a PERT chart. Okay, PERT chart is really helpful, and it has all the estimations, especially time. And cost estimations are usually in WBS. In PERT, we only have the durations and estimations for activities, right? And then using these estimates, using Simpson's rule or some historical data, your experience, focus groups, looking at what the company did in the previous projects, you come up with the select time. You calculate your select time, because it will identify the critical path, which has a lot of risks on it, right? So you want to always monitor the critical path, make sure everything goes well, because it affects your scheduling. Anything late on the critical path is delaying the project. So if you are 1 week late in one of the critical activities on the critical path, your project will be delivered 1 week later. And you come up with probabilities, because your program manager, your portfolio manager, your CEO, your director, your board will ask you like questions like, can you finish early? What's the confidence level, right? So you want to be able to answer those kind of questions and queries. So you want to calculate your probabilities. And monitor and control is basically like everywhere on this slide, right? You always want to monitor and control your progress. Think about it. You started your day and you are late. Let's say at 9 a.m. you are late. Don't you want to know that you're late? Well, you're late, but at least when you know you're late, you can move around and reschedule, reshuffle, and then you can be back on track again. So monitoring and controlling is really everywhere on the slide. And if you think you're gonna be late, if the project deliverable are getting late, then you wanna fast track it, crash it. You wanna compress your project, right? Be mindful with the risks that we covered, and then you're gonna complete the project. Okay, that's actually the big picture I want you to remember, like all the steps. Sometimes your project will last 1 week, sometimes 1 year, sometimes 10-20 years. So but that is gonna be always the big picture. It's a lot of challenge for project managers. That's why project management is highly sought after position, and companies and programs are looking for skilled project managers. That's why I recommend you to go ahead and get your PMP certification. It's not easy, but that's actually the book most of the universities are using. You can get some of the exam preparation. Harold Kersner's book is not specifically for PMP, okay? So that's to understand your project management domain. But PMP exam preparations and PMBOK guide is what really PMP seeks after, okay? You want to be able to grab one of these books, get study, attend some more webinars, and to see what are the test taking techniques you can develop over time beside the content knowledge. Then you want to improve your test taking skills, and get the certification will secure you a lot of good positions, okay? I would like to hear you after even this summer. So please go ahead and email me with your comments, with your feedback, and I would like to hear good news from you. I want to hear you got you secured some jobs, you promoted, and I'll be proud of you. Thanks for being with me this summer. Thank you so much, and see you at another adventure. Bye bye.